the things I noticed as we move on to the next one, and this is just something I want you to get used to, is I didn't actually explicitly say do your commit, right? So this is what will happen as we move forward. You get a little more used to things, right? So hopefully, and before you start coding, right, and it actually should be define, oh, I actually updated this content already, but let's see if it came in there, right? And it should say define, define and call the click, handle click function, or just a function. Did I update it here? I shouldn't have, but this commit message is fine. All right, so now let's talk about, so point of this is just make sure after each video, unless I tell you within the video, always make sure at the end you're committing your code. So now let's talk about and start coding up an event listener. So now that we have a function that we want to run it when the user does something. So we're going to listen for an event, right? But we're going to wait for that event, or wait to attach that event until what we call the DOM content is loaded. Now, by the way, this is kind of what defer does for us, but again, there's so many things happening when web pages load. We have multiple ways to make sure it's ready for the user to interact. Okay, so then we'll attach that listener, and then we'll actually be able to click and watch that handle click function execute. So that's what we're about to do. All right, so back at our code now. So underneath here, we're actually going to do, remember I showed you before, if you remember, so this is not a bad thing to remind ourselves, is when you do document, right? It is the whole document, and that is the DOM, right? So the document object model. So when the web page renders, at the end of that render is a object or a document object model, an object itself. You'll learn about objects later. And so whenever we in our code want to write something that is handled or is attached to the whole page, that's what we do. We write document. Okay, so we're in this case, and this is going to feel a little bit longer. Okay, so we're going to say add event listener. Okay, so on the web page, add an event listener. You're going to listen for something. And what are you going to listen for? And in this case, there's many things you can listen for, like a click event, like a submit event. We'll see those later. But for today, the event we want to listen for is just, hey, is the DOM loaded? Is the DOM content completely loaded? Is the web page ready to go? And so what we're going to do here is we're going to say comma, and this is when we're going to run a function. Okay? Now, this function is not this function up here. It's what we call a callback function. Okay. Now you'll learn more about callback functions later, but in this sense, they're okay. I don't want to say basically. They're basically this idea of a function. But what happens is when this event happens, then when this loads, then it's going to run whatever is in this function right here. So it's a callback, meaning when this happens, then do this. Okay, now what are we going to do in here, right? So the first thing I'm going to have you do is write, in this case, right, because remember how we had to call this from the page load? Well, this is going to wait for that web page to be loaded, and then it's going to do this. So it's going to handle that for us. So what's it going to do? So let's first do a console log so we get some information, right? So let's actually do DOM fully loaded, and what we call parsed. It's ready to go, right? App is ready for interaction. So now it's ready for the user to interact with it. Now this is not clicking yet. This is just, we're saying, hey, we're ready. The document is now ready for you to do whatever you're going to do inside of this particular callback. And then again, it's just a function. Okay, so what are you going to do here? Well, you're going to add an event listener to what? To the button, because we know we have that button. right? So where do we have it? We have a reference to that from up here, that update button, okay? I was just going to show it. So just to remind us, right, that we have the update button. And when you hit enter, and by the way, here it is, right? And if you hit enter, and then it actually shows you the HTML, and in your dev tools, it points to that. So we know that variable points to that button. So what do we want to do, right? What do we want to do here? And we'll come back and put some comments here to understand this. We're going to say update button, which is the reference to that dot add an event listener. So we're nesting event listeners. We're saying, hey, page loads, now run this. And then when this row loads, which this callback function says add an event listener, and in this case, it's going to be a click. And what are we going to do here? Now this one is going to look different, okay? We're going to still do the comma as we did up here. That's going to indicate a callback function, but in this case, we're just going to call this function. But in this example, and that's why I showed you the one before, because this is not necessarily when you first see it, it will be like, okay, handle click event. And there's reasons why we don't do it with the open and close parentheses, okay? Because it's an event listener, right? And so it actually gets something sent to it, even though we're not sending it explicitly. And we'll talk about those later, okay? But for right now, we're now adding now we're actually listening for an event, okay? So let's actually see this in action, because it's kind of cool, in my humble opinion, right? So actually let's take that off. Let's let it run. It's completely run. And by the way, look what happened, right? So this document, add event listener, when the DOM was loaded, ran that output this console, and now, and this, we didn't see anything out of this, which would kind of make sense, but it just set up something. And by the way, if you ever wanted to see this, you could go over to Elements and then Event Listeners, and you will see there's an event listener sitting there waiting on the whole document, and even shows you what line it's on, which is awesome. So now, guess what? We can come over here and click. Oh, right? So when we click now, it's listening for the button. It ran this function. And so the first time it ran on page load, which, by the way, we no longer want to do, and we'll fix that, okay? But if I do it again, it's 3, boom, 4, okay? And then you can also, of course, set here, you can set your breakpoint, hit refresh, right? And it's like, okay, I'm here. And you might think, well, why didn't it run that? Okay? And the answer is you didn't click, because this just sets it up. And if you actually want to do that, right? Oh, sorry. Actually, it should have been inside of here. My bad. Here, if I click this, then I set my breakpoint and it's there. So let's do this. Let's actually get rid of this to make it even hopefully more clear, okay, what's happening here, right? So now the DOM loads, we no longer see anything from the function, because the function is sitting there ready to go. But now there's an event listener setting on the button that says, okay, oh, and I have a breakpoint set, right? So now 1 click, 2 click. So that is an event listener. These are so much of what JavaScript is about, because you as the user, right? All of us as the users, this is what we're doing. We're clicking. I mean, most of the time, think about what you're doing on the web. You're clicking something, right? Well, that's why these event listeners are so important. So let's put some of this content to help us, right? So now, let's see, did I even put, I didn't. So let's just put these two first ones, right? Okay, so we'll put this right here, right? So this is part 3, right? This ensures our JavaScript code loads after the HTML is fully loaded and parsed. So important. Okay, the document content loaded is perfect for this, right? It is totally, and we're going to even see, as we start working on the carbon footprint, another way to do this. Now, we're attaching the event listener here, This is attaching the event listener to that reference into the button, right? That's what we're doing there. And then when the update button is clicked, right? Then that's what happens. When the update button receives a click event, right? And by the way, there's an event. We'll talk about what this event looks like because it actually has we can actually peer into it and look. There's a ton of stuff that gets tracked about that event because, as you could imagine, because of how important it is, right? All right, so the prompts you want to, and you're going to do a commit here, but explain what an event listener is in JavaScript and provide simple examples and describe why they are essential for making web pages interactive. So hopefully you at least after this discussion and code have a beginning idea, but expand your knowledge. Explain the document object model represented in JavaScript and provide simple examples of how it's used to access and modify HTML on a web page. This is basically just helping you do that. All right, so save your progress, do your commit, make the button clickable event listeners. What a great thing to cover. Now we only have one more, which is how to make a decision, because what's the decision we want to make? Right? First, we want to update this. We haven't even talked about this, right? We haven't updated anything. We have sent some messages here, so we'll do that on the last one. All right, see you in a minute.